Hey everyone, welcome back. This is our, fifth video of the Pulse Conference, and I have another speaker with me today. This is our second day. Thank you so much for joining us, Connor.
Hi, how's it going?
Pretty good. How's your conference so far?
It's been really great. It is my first time at Pulse, invited to speak, so I'm happy to be out here. So it's great.
That's awesome. What did you speak about?
We spoke about whether or not a career in CS Ops is for you. You know, there's a lot of people in the world right now that have been working in customer success for a while. And as customer success has grown, operational roles have also needed to grow as well. So our panel was really just about, is this a career path that makes sense for you now that you're a person that's in CS? Is operations actually where you want to be, working alongside CS? So that's really what we were talking about in our panel yesterday.
So maybe I can ask you about a question about CS Ops, since
Sure.
you seem like you know a lot about it. If somebody just started a customer success program, when would you advise them to hire their first CS Ops person? And does your answer change if it's a large company or a small company?
I think if you're a large company, you probably should have started your CS Ops the same time you started your CS team, if I'm being totally honest. There's so much that goes into play when it comes to building out the operational structure of a CS program that you really need to have someone who's geared towards the operational excellence of that program. If you're a small company, you're probably wearing two hats, if I'm being totally honest. That's the way that most people start out in this business anyway, is that as a CS person, you're also going to be thinking about the operational problems that you're facing on a day-to-day basis, and you're going to be solving those problems together. But I think realistically, as sooner the better is when I would say, is the best answer.
Add-on question to that. I think in 2021, when a lot of companies were raising a ton of money, they started putting in the ops role earlier than later. Do you think that's going to change this year? Or do you see that changing already?
I do see that changing. As we look around, there's more and more operational roles for CS that have been created and being dedicated specifically within the program. I think that one of the things that's going to continue to change is the way that they structure them. So specifically where I work at Lucid, we actually are part of revenue operations. We're not necessarily tied to CS itself. We're a partner to operations. So we're really more there to work for what's the best for the business and also the best for CS. But ultimately, we're responsible to the business more than we're responsible to just CS, if that makes sense.
I was just going to ask you about that, because I have a client and she actually hired an ops person. She said she's basically sharing it with the rev team.
Yep.
And I was like, is that good practices? Or do you maybe another route that companies do is they have the CS Ops have a hybrid role between a CSM with a few accounts and CS Ops. What do you think works better? What would you recommend a company?
It really depends on the people and the problems that you're trying to solve. I don't know that there's a best answer to that situation. What I would say is that being able to really distinguish your function and your roles, that you can be focused, is the most important thing. If you're going to take someone who's going to be a CSM with a limited book and be in CS Ops, they need to have a limited book. There are so many problems to solve in operations that if you're worried about their NRR and their churn and their numbers, they're not going to be as successful when it comes to trying to do all those operational roles that they really need to be able to focus on. I would say that more and more people, to kind of your earlier point about whether or not you can share a person between RevOps, it really goes back to it. So at Lucid, we actually have a revenue operations organization where I have a sales ops counterpart that is a manager of sales ops. He has a team of analysts. I'm the CS ops manager, and I have a team of analysts that work for me. And then we come together to work on collaborative projects all the time for the entire go-to-market structure. And there's other teams as well, like partner sales, or partnerships, I should say, as well as marketing, all have a place inside of kind of our greater revenue operations structure.
Okay, what is the sense in putting everything under one big operations group? Do you guys share resources? Do you share tools?
We do. So the real benefit that we have is there's a lot better synergy between the teams, because it's not necessarily you have a natural tendency for CS and sales to feel somewhat competitive in a lot of situations, where the operations is meant to be kind of the bridge to all the go-to-market teams, where because we're not in CS and because we're not in sales, if I'm being candid, we don't necessarily care that much. Our feelings aren't involved.
Political shenanigans,
exactly.
Basically.
It becomes way less political, and it's easier for us to compromise and to find the areas where it's does it make sense for this? Does it make sense for that? Is that bonus structure fair for CS and not fair for sales? And it's really easy for us to be kind of the third party that says, this is a good idea or this isn't a good idea. And there's not a lot of hurt feelings in that sense because we're not caught up in the emotions of like our team, so to speak, versus like, no, we're the operations team. We're here to work for the business and to work for our teams and make them all successful together. So I think that that's one of the things that kind of makes it a benefit of having us being kind of a separate third-party entity.
Well, I want to take a minute to personally thank Rocket Lanes for sponsoring this video. And in the spirit of tools, I'm going to ask you, beyond Gainsight, obviously, your team administers that. Do you actually have a CS stack, like a CS stack?
Yeah, definitely a lot of different products that we're using. So we have we use Gainsight. I think we're using Groove as part of our sales. Also uses Groove for email campaigns, and then we use Gainsight
for
PX.
CS?
Yeah, CS is also involved with Groove.
Wow. And then PX
Gainsight PX for onboarding. So those are
for onboarding the users.
Correct, users.
And what do you use to onboard accounts?
Yeah, we use Gainsight PX primarily for that. And then side of that, it's a lot of one-on-one training. We use our own products a lot, actually, and within Lucid itself, it's a product that's really lends itself well to working with customers and also gets them into our product earlier. So we use that to train in the product itself.
That's cool. Okay. Mm-hmm. So what kind of tools does your team and like projects that you do? Do you define processes, analyze data, admin the tools, all of the above?
We do a little bit of everything. So right now we've been getting caught up on a number of things. So we deliver a lot of analytics and reporting around the needs of what the CS leadership group needs. So specifically our team, because we're smaller at the moment than we'd like to be, we spend most of our time dedicated to working with our CS management team, where, like I said, we deliver a lot of analytics and reporting on efficiencies. And then we're going through and breaking down some processes to say, is this the best way for you to get this data? Is this the best way for you to be using this? Right now, we're actually going through a big project to make sure that Gainsight's being utilized as effectively as we can. We've had a number of problems with people not using it the way that it was meant to, or not tracking behavior the way that they ought to, and making the most of it. So we spent a lot of time in the last little bit going through and making sure that Gainsight's being utilized effectively, because it's a great tool, and we want to make sure that people are using it the way it's meant to be.
So you said you have 3 different people on your CS Ops team. What kind of talent are you looking for when you hire maybe for potentially the 4th one, or a hindsight, given what your team is about and what was successful and what was not? If somebody else was to hire a CS Ops team, what kind of skills should they be looking for?
Yeah, I think team size, regardless, the number one thing is you're looking for smart, intuitive problem solvers. That's really what it boils down to. Our SVP of CS, he's a super sharp guy. He has this Excel test where it's one of the most important things that we look for is he puts you into this, we're on a call together, right? And it's just a set of Excel data, and he says, tell me what's wrong with this data. And basically the entire structure is for an individual to go in and intuitively look at the data and find problems and logical errors that are not necessarily straightforward. And so some of the things that we look for in these individuals that are really successful in operational roles is the ability to poke holes in data, poke holes in process, poke holes in ideas, essentially, and then to be able to not just poke holes, but then go repair them and fill the gaps and go back and solve. Find solutions. Exactly. So that's the kind of things that I think are super valuable when we're looking for CS operational roles, is people who do that. I think experience in CS is also super valuable because it's easier to empathize and understand that go-to-market strategy, but I wouldn't say it's a demand or necessary for a role, because really, you need people that are able to just be sharp, who are smart, who can listen to a series of problems. I think that's one of the things that I ignored before, but I would say is hugely important, is being a good listener and being able to bring people together and get all the right people into a room and then find what is the actual problem that people are saying and synthesize all of that information into one cohesive big problem that we can then go in and solve and that we want to focus on. Because you're naturally going to have people that just complain about all their little henpecked details. What you really want is someone who can connect all those dots and find the big problem.
So I think the main takeaway from this video is, for anybody that's listening and watching this, if you have that kind of aptitude, you're probably going to be very good at it, and it might be a really good role for you. What kind of training do you recommend your team to take? How do you make them better going forward? Or if I wanted to get into that role, Do I just take an Gainsight admin class? Is that like a good
so interesting enough, we don't actually admin Gainsight in our team. We have our Gainsight is admin by our business systems team. So the same group that like runs Salesforce and our other systems like Jira and things like that, like they are also running Gainsight for us. So we're still just ending up submitting tickets to them and then working super closely with them because we know what we want it to look like. They're just the ones who are going to deliver it. I know enough to be dangerous, but I'm not an admin. That's what I would say. And so for any individual that's thinking of getting into it, you don't have to be an admin in order to get into CS operations, especially because not all teams are going to be using Gainsight anyway. That's not what's most important. The most important thing is having a good understanding of whatever your tools are or the tools that are in question. Knowing Gainsight wouldn't hurt necessarily, obviously, because it's super common, but like knowing Salesforce is probably much more important. If you're comfortable with Salesforce, because that's where, I don't know, that's like table stakes for understanding a sales org. And
so what kind of
like
training, like I'm a CSM, I want to move to CS Ops, what should I do?
I would say the two biggest things you can do is, one, be really good with Excel. Like, Excel data is just like, I guess
Power BI, Excel, slice and dice, do pivots.
Exactly. If you know how to do pivots, if you can do Tableau data, if you can do Power BI, any of those like super powerful like data tools,
attributes.
Exactly. Those are the things that I think are super important. So if I was going to go tell someone who really wanted to get into CS Ops and they felt overwhelmed by kind of the idea of it, I would be focused on data analysis is really like the best place to start, because if you can do solid data analysis, I almost guarantee your manager knows how to do it, but needs someone to do that more than they can do it, right?
So ever assigned like, okay, design the process and then you need to actually document it, like with a workflow or workflow diagrams and such. So also learn Lucid.
Learning Lucid is a great tool for diagramming and charting, right? If you want to learn to like process documentation and go from anywhere in the visual collaboration about ideation and then take it to a document where you're going to put together a process and a flowchart, Lucid would certainly be very helpful.
And I would say that on your website, there's actually a lot of like blogs and YouTubes and like all sorts of things that you can learn how to do this properly. Not just how to use a widget within their solution, but actually best practices as there should be, obviously, because you do have customer success management and like thought leadership. But that would be one of the skills that I would recommend picking up, because everybody talks about using systems and knowing Salesforce and maybe knowing Gainsight to some degree and like understanding data and understanding Excel. Sure, everything is fine. But if you don't understand how all of that really should correlate back to optimizing processes, Houston, we have a problem.
Yeah.
So if you don't really understand how the process works and or how everything that we do, essentially to impact NRR, net retention rate, you have to have the strategy optimized. And you can't do that unless you have processes using that better data or processes optimized or scaled when leveraging and analyzing that data at the end of the day.
You're totally right. I would say it's like the ability to break down an entire process, find the weak links in it, and be able to solve for it and improve the process can't be overlooked. I think I get caught up sometimes in the data, so maybe I've overspoken to that, overaddressed to it. But yeah, I mean, obviously using all of your data and all of your research to be able to go back and look at an entire process from start to finish and be able to figure out what do I need to do to help this team be more efficient in the future or more successful, whatever, where's my bottleneck, those types of things are going to be super, super important. Whether or not you're doing that in Lucid, honestly, it is what it is. But Lucid is a really great way to be able to build out a process specifically to the way that you want to understand it. So
So step number one, kind of know your tech environment, the common tech stack for companies and Salesforce, Gainsight, whatever it is that your company's doing. Step number two, really understand how to analyze data so that when you do choose what to optimize, you can do data-driven decisions as to where to pinpoint your efforts so you can get maximum impact with a minimum amount of effort, and then actually designing that process and being able to articulate it in a visual way, either using Lucid or any other tool. So you need to know how to document processes and visually represent them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I completely agree.
And then you can be the best CS Ops person.
That'll take you to be a CS Ops person. That gets you in the door, and then it's just a matter of being really good at communicating those ideas back to people.
It was such an absolute pleasure having you here. I'm sure your session was quite phenomenal. All right. And with that, it's a wrap.